quick explanation of the topic debit note. A debit note is also called a debit memo and can be used both by the seller and a buyer. A buyer sends a debit note to confirm adjustments in the original invoice amount, such as for goods returned. However, a seller may send a debit note simply to remind about the outstanding balance due or modify an already submitted invoice, for example, to increase the amount. An example of a debit note when a buyer sends it is suppose company ABC purchases goods worth 50,000 from company XYZ on credit. However, 10,000 worth of goods were found damaged, and this was notified by the buyer to the seller at the time of delivery. Now, ABC company creates a debit note to be sent to XYZ company, who is the seller, along with the return of damaged goods, which acts as a formal instruction to the seller, so they can now reduce or debit the amount due by 10,000. An example of a debit note when sent by the seller is suppose a seller may discover that it invoiced the buyer for 5,000 when the actual amount due for the sale is 7,000. In this case, the seller will send a debit note to the buyer for the additional 2,000 along with the explanation for the change in the invoiced amount. Few highlights of a debit note are: they are used to rectify an invoice where the buyer was undercharged. They are issued when a buyer returns goods to the seller due to defects, damages, or incorrect items. They are used to adjust for discrepancies in the quantity of goods delivered versus the quantity invoiced. Debit notes also help to keep an audit trail of all the changes related to receivables and payables.